According to Cloud. Okay. And I will let people in.
People are coming in. Welcome as you arrive. We're just going to give it a few minutes here. This is a new format for us, but I think everybody's pretty familiar with Zoom at this point, so we're thinking that there won't be any glitches today. It does seem like one of the things about the pandemic is we've all become incredibly resilient.
Yes.
Had a couple times where we've had these sessions and, you know, suddenly it just doesn't work. And then you just, okay, well, we'll just move over. We started off one of our talks with Lila R on Crowdcast, couldn't get it to work, it kept crashing, and then just flipped it to Zoom. Here we go.
And it worked, yeah.
Wedding. You know, a year ago, if you had a talk and you were all set to go and then it just didn't work, I feel like I would have been sweating and panicked, and now I'm just like, well, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Every day throws new things that I used to adapt. Yeah. There are bigger problems in this world than your podcast session not starting. All right, so I will see, while people are joining, I'm going to just read some of the basics of MindCORE. I think that most of our community today is familiar with MindCORE, but just in case we have somebody coming from outside of the University of Pennsylvania, I feel like it is my duty to explain what we are. So this talk today is hosted by MindCORE, and I am Heather Calvert. I'm the Executive Director for MindCORE, which stands for the Mind Center for Outreach, Research, and Education at the University of Pennsylvania. MindCORE is an interdisciplinary effort at Penn to understand human intelligence and behavior, and brings together faculty, postdocs, and students with diverse approaches to the study of the mind from across Penn schools, including the School of Arts and Sciences, where we're housed, Wharton School of Business, Communications, Medicine, and other. So that is what we do. I will post in the chat a link to our website where you can see other upcoming events. We'll actually have an event tomorrow at the same time at noon on the same platform here on Zoom with Dr. Ayelet Ruscio. Will be presenting her research. And then let's see, what else can I tell you? And then next Wednesday, I believe we have our final speaker, and I'm gonna have to look it up because right now my mind is drawing a blank. So one other housekeeping matter is that if you have questions for Dr. Trueswell during his presentation, please just go ahead and post them during the chat. I will be monitoring those and will interrupt. If there's a question in the chat and you are a participant and you feel like you know the answer, then go ahead and feel free to answer it. Sometimes one of the nice things about this new format is, unlike a regular seminar where everybody's quiet until the end, you can actually share any insights, links to relevant papers or anything during the talk. We can crowdsource some of those answers. Okay, so with that, I think I will turn it over to our speaker. I'm just going to drag it out for like 40 more seconds so we have a few more people who can join. John, just so you know, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
Yep, that's fine.
And I will turn it over to you. So our speaker today is Dr. John Trueswell from the Psychology Department at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Trueswell.
Okay, great. Thanks, Heather. I'm really glad to be here and to present to everyone. A couple of things I just want to mention is that I may not be able to see the text questions coming up. I'm not sure, but in the way that the interface is working, it doesn't, all I see are some faces on the side. So Heather, you may need to jump in and read some if they come up and they're important to discuss. Right
Let you know, and I'll wait.
Okay, all right, great. And also, if there's trouble hearing me or anything like that, of course, interrupt and let us know, and we'll try to fix it. So, all right, so welcome. I'm John Trueswell. I'm a professor in the psychology department, and I study language learning and language processing. we were asked to actually say a little bit about our background, you know, how we got started in this line of work. I think for me that the moment when I realized that I wanted to do cognitive science actually came when I was an undergraduate. I was an electrical engineering major, and I was at the University of Rochester. And I took this really great cognitive science course as an elective, Intro to Cog Sci by Gary Dell, who's a very well-known language production researcher. And the thing that really I distinctly remember being very excited about was the idea that you could actually use reaction time to measure how long it takes you to think, how long it takes you to compute something. So those studies of just simple reaction time and showing that systematically you slow down as you have to compute more really were really eye-opening, because I realized that you could actually study computation in the mind by looking at behavior. And then, you know, since then, I really got into language and understanding how people process language, and used reaction time for a lot of work. I was really interested in processing issues. Eventually, I got a PhD in psychology, and came here to Penn, actually, as my first job. And I've stayed here ever since because it's an amazing place. And got very interested in language acquisition, in part thanks to Lila Gleitman, who I think you guys spoke with earlier. Lila is terrific, and gets everybody interested in language acquisition, it seems. That was a number of years ago, and we started a collaboration about, 20 years ago, and we've been working together ever since. Today, what I'm going to be telling you about is what the title says here: the hard problem of learning easy words, and how the easy words make the hard words easier. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. Before I start telling you about all of that work, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is all part of work going on in the Language Learning Lab with lots of different interesting researchers, Lila Gleitman among them. Some of these people you've met. Most probably everybody knows Victor Gomez, who's been working with me on language acquisition and language acquisition work, but also Martin Knipp, who's a postdoc in the ILST Language Science and Technology program, Spencer Kaplan, who's a graduate student in linguistics, Anna Papafragu, who I think you listened to as well. Monica recently left as a postdoc and is now at Chicago as a professor, or starting it this fall as a professor. And then someone's coming soon, Sandy LaTourette from Northwestern. And of course, Charles Yang too. We've all been working together on related issues. I wanted to also take a moment and point out 3 different projects. I won't be telling you about these today, but they are all projects being conducted this summer that are by people in this group. Abby and Jenna are both MindCORE fellows, and Michelle is a PERM undergraduate researcher, and they've all been working on projects related to language. And just briefly to mention these, Abby's been looking at word learning and eye tracking, and we're actually developing a way of recording gaze direction online over the internet. And then Jenna has been developing a study on symmetry and sign language, and whether people who don't even know sign language would be able to map certain kinds of spatial representations of signs onto very abstract word meanings, like this one here. You can ask yourself, you may not know sign language at all, but is this sign more likely to mean to be equal or to be greater than? Turns out it doesn't mean either of those things, but many people would think that it means to be equal, and interesting reasons why that might be. Yes?
John, I'm actually not seeing your screen right now.
Oh, you're not?
Yeah, I see you, which was great.
Yes.
We were doing an intro. But just when you saw the equal sign, I realized.
Oh, and look, it says this meeting is being recorded, and it probably wanted to. Now, do you see it?
Mm-mm.
Oh. That's funny. I think it broke out of the share screen at some point here. So.
Oh, wait, I'm alone. Everybody else sees it, so we're fine.
Oh, that's strange.
I don't know why, but I don't see it. But nope, everyone else sees the screen, so you're good.
Okay, and okay, great.
Sorry about that.
And then finally, Michelle is doing work on prosody, the tune and tempo of speech. And you know, a simple example here: the boy gave her cat food, or the boy gave her cat food. You can have different interpretations of whole sentences depending on the timing and prosody of speech. Heather, you good? Okay, all right. Okay, great. So, but these are all ongoing projects. What I thought I would do today is try to review. Now we're having a new problem, which is now my slides won't advance. Like Heather said, there are bigger problems in the world. And so I think I have to somehow fix this problem. Okay, I can't advance the slides. Let me escape out of this, maybe. Huh. Try this. Is it moving forward?
I do see your slides now, so.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's actually right. Hold on. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but I want to. Now, can I move forward? Ah, yes. Okay. It's now working again. Good. Okay. So, but coming back to the topic of learning words, it's actually probably useful to sort of start by dividing words in a language into two very broad categories. If we're going to think about how kids learn the meanings of words, there are lots of different things that have to go into the process of learning a language, right? You have to learn basic speech sounds of your language. You have to know what's good in English and what's not good in English. But you also have to learn the words, how they're pronounced, and then also what these words mean. In addition, you also have to learn things like the syntax of your language and what the syntax means even. But let's just start with the lexicon, learning the words. Each of you, as an adult who has learned English, probably knows, you know, on the order of 30,000 words. So your vocabulary size is about 30,000 to 40,000 words. And this is fairly common. Most people know just tons and tons of words. And it's interesting actually just to mention also that sometimes people have no idea how many words there are in a language. There's a famous quote from some scientist once who said that you know, the 900 to 1,000 words of English, thinking that was all the words of English. But really there's tens of thousands of words. And you have to learn what the meaning is of each of these individual words, because it's a giant memorization process, because each word is pronounced differently and you have to memorize the pronunciation and its pairing with a particular meaning. And we can think about words that are easy to learn and words that are hard to learn. So what are words that are easy to learn? So if you ask yourself, how do kids learn the meaning of a word like dog or cat? Those seem easy, and indeed those are the first words that kids learn. And most likely that's because these words are not very abstract in their meaning, they're concrete, which means that the reference, the things that the words refer to out there in the world, when you use those words to refer, are going to be relatively easy to observe. So if you're a mother and you're kind, You probably will say the word dog when a dog is around to help you learn the meaning of the word dog. So the referent is clear and easy to observe in many circumstances. And indeed, these are the words that are learned first. There's also, you can think of hard words, which is really the rest of the vocabulary in many ways. So if you stop and think about it, how do children learn the meaning of the word think or the meaning of the word not? Okay, just stop and think about circumstances under which you hear your mother say, you know, I think that's nice. And you hear that word think. How would you ever learn that think means think, right? It's not like there's a clear referent out there in the world. If you look at people, oftentimes all of them are thinking. You couldn't tell the thinkers from the non-thinkers out there in the world. And so if you hear the word think, there's not going to be something that is easily corresponding in the world, something that you could see in the world that would correspond to the word think, right? And indeed, these words tend to be abstract. They're hard to observe, and indeed, they are learned later. They are words that show up in a child's vocabulary a little bit later, often rather than at age 1 for the easy words. These are words that start showing up at age 2 and 3, like think and not. Now, one thing to also point out is that one of the other large differences between the easy words and the hard words is that there are many, many more hard words than easy words. So other hard words are, for instance, in this question, how do children learn the meaning of the word think or not? How do kids learn the meaning of how? Do, learn, the, meaning, of, the, and word are all things that are very abstract in meaning. And so if you think about all of the words that you're hearing right now in this talk, probably about 80 to 85% of them are quite abstract, and you would have a hard time trying to figure out how in the world would a child ever learn the meaning of those words, right? So this is a really difficult problem to try to sort out exactly how it is that these words are learned by a child, okay? Now, what I was going to do today, however, is actually start with the easy words and look at how kids learn the easy words. And perhaps that might help us gain some insight into how they might learn the hard words as well, right? So how is it that they learn the meaning of the word dog or cat? And I'm going to ask some questions here that, like, are they really that easy to learn? Are they really not abstract? Are they concrete? Are the meanings concrete as we normally think of them for dog and cat even? And are they really easy to observe? Are the circumstances under which you hear the word dog from your mother or your father, your caregiver, anybody, are they circumstances in which you would know what they're talking about, what a person is talking about? After all, if you're actually going to learn how to map the sound dog onto an idea like dog, the concept dog, then you better have circumstances in which you could easily guess that the message was about dogs, that the person was talking about dogs, right? So it is true that children do learn their first words from observation of the referent world. They take advantage of what's in front of them to try to infer the meaning of these so-called easy words. But this process is quite abstract. If you stop and think about how it is you could learn the meaning of the word dog and say that a child has learned what dog means, and you built like a little computer program, let's say, that would characterize the process and characterize the representations, crucially, that would be needed to say, hey, this child's learned the meaning of the word dog. You very quickly realize it's a very abstract process. So you think at first that it's, oh, you just map the sound, this is the waveform on the left here, to what the child is looking at, image of a dog, right? The light landing on the child's eyes and the sound waves going into the ear, and there's some connection between the two. Well, that's not going to work very well for a number of different reasons. First of all, hearing the sound dog is going to be pronounced differently by everybody in the language. So people with higher pitch voices, lower pitch voices, with accents, etc. There's going to be lots of variation in exactly how someone is pronouncing the word dog. So in the mind of the child, that has to be a representation on the left there that is an abstract category, a speech sound, a set of phonemes strung together, right? The, g, right? And that actually is what's going to be connected to what the child is seeing. But notice that what the child is seeing also has lots of variability, that any given dog is going to look different from another dog, right? So it isn't the case that you want this baby to map the exact sound dog from a particular speaker to this exact image of a dog. No, you have to generalize. You have to say that the category of the sound dog and the category of this example of a dog are somehow connected together. So that later on, when you hear somebody else say the word dog, you can say, oh, that's an example of this abstract category sound dog. And also, if you look out in the world and now see, let's say, a collie rather than a beagle, you can also categorize that as a dog, as an abstract concept, and you map the two, one to the other. So even for these very so-called easy words, it's quite an abstract process, right? Another thing is that in addition to it being abstract, learning from observation is actually quite difficult. It's not as easy as it might seem to be when you first think about it. Probably one of the biggest problems is that there are just way too many things in the world, right? So when you actually hear a word that you don't know the meaning of, let's just create a nonsense word like vash, in the home or any circumstance really, there's lots of different things that vash could be referring to at the moment you hear that word, right? So this is often referred to as the problem of referential ambiguity. What exactly does vash mean in this circumstance? There's so many different things that a parent might be talking about in the home when using the word vash, okay? To bring that back to this sort of very simple model here, the child is hearing some word and seeing, now the scene is this complex, environment of some kind with lots of different things present, objects and things happening, which you could be referring to as well, like verbs referring to events. And so here now, although you might be hearing a particular word like dog, now you have to decide which of these many different concepts, these abstract categories of dog and sofa and clock and pillow and lamp and book, which one does it actually map onto, right? How do you figure out what the correct mapping is between word form, sound, and word category meaning, right? And this actually is a very complex and difficult problem to try to resolve for the child, okay? So how do they do this? How do babies sort of break into this problem and sort out this issue of referential uncertainty? Well, probably one of the most well-known proposals that has been around for a long time and was demonstrated experimentally quite nicely by Dare Baldwin in 1993 is that kids are actually pretty good at reading the intentions of speakers. When a person is trying to communicate to a child, one of the things that the child actually does is try to sort out, well, what is this person intending to refer to? And what she demonstrated was that 18-month-olds can actually use the eye gaze and posture of an adult as cues to the speaker's attentional state, what they're looking at, what they're thinking about for object labeling. So in the study, what she did was she had the parent and the child come into the lab, and they set up this circumstance that was very, very specific, where they taught the parent to say something at a very precise moment in time. So the child was given a toy object that doesn't have a name, some novel object that the child wouldn't know the name of, and the child starts playing with it. And the moment that the child was looking at the object and playing with it, that was the mother's cue to say, look, a dax, do you see a dax? So using a novel word, okay? And interestingly, what was observed was that 18-month-olds will look up at the parent and see where mom is looking at that moment when they hear the novel word, okay? This was actually, so this would be called concurrent labeling, where the parent and child are jointly looking at the same thing. This would be a great learning instance for trying to figure out what the meaning of this particular word is. You can compare that with a situation in which instead the mother was instructed to look inside a bucket and say, oh, look, a dax. Do you see a dax? And what was found in this study was that if you take an object out of the bucket and take the other toy object and ask the child what a dax means, that in this context, they think the dax is the toy that they were playing with. And in this context, they think it was the dax is the thing that was in the bucket. Right? So they seem to be following the speaker's gaze and using that to infer what the referent is, limiting the number of referents to consider at any given moment. Okay, so kids are reading the intentions of the speaker, right? Also, it's interesting to note that if you go a little bit younger, what you find is that in this condition, actually, like if you look at 16-month-olds, kids don't learn anything at all under this condition. They don't sit, this disjoint labeling condition where the parent is looking at something else rather than the thing that the child was labeling. And so they don't infer that whatever dax means is whatever's in that bucket. Instead, they just say, I'm not going to learn anything under these circumstances, but they do learn under this circumstance where there's joint attention. Okay, so there seems to be good evidence that, at least in the laboratory, kids can use the gaze of speakers to infer the meanings of words. And you might ask, well, is the problem solved? Is that it? Do kids just follow the gaze of speakers and figure out these easy words and move on to the hard words? But a really important question is, what about in the home? Is it really the case that examples of parents using these easy words like dog and cat are actually these commonly like what Dare Baldwin built up in her experiment, right? Is it the case that there's clear joint attention between parent and child for these easy words? Is that the common, typical way in which parents are talking to children? Or is it that kind of circumstance either never happens or happens very rarely? Okay, and we asked this question a few years ago, Lila Gleitman and I, and we developed a rather long research program about exactly what the referential contexts are like in the home for these easy words. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of these studies briefly today. The first set of studies actually just look at the question, try to answer the question, what is the referential context like for easy words in the home? Is it the case that they're like the Dare Baldwin situation in which the parent is looking at the dog and the dog is there and the mother says dog at that moment? Or is it that life is crazy in the home and it's rarely the case that there's any joint attention going on when kids are picking up individual words and hearing them, right? And to sort of foreshadow the findings, what we actually find is that most contexts of use of easy words are actually very uninformative. There's no way that you would be able to guess that the parent was saying dog, meant dog when saying the word dog. And that fortunately though, there are certain very rare moments, rare contexts that provide clear referential transparency. These are the Dare Baldwin moments, these laboratory type moments. They do happen, but not very frequently. And so this actually raises questions about how in the world you can tell the good ones, the gems, from the junk. And one thing that we started asking was, well, what about the temporal characteristics of the speaker? Are these transparent moments of referential clarity examples in which the speaker is providing clear tight temporal cues with the speech act? Are they looking at the referent at the exact moment that they're saying the critical word? And this also leads us to the question of like, what kind of learner is operating on this input? If most of the input is junk, how do you throw that away? How do you sort that out from the gems? So what kind of learner operates on this input? And what I'll argue is that a very targeted learner is operating on this input that's very sensitive to the timing of attentional cues, and that is very focused on single meanings for words and trying to test those the hypothesis of a single meaning when the word is encountered again. And this is what we've referred to as propose but verify a learning procedure. Okay, so that's a lot, but what we'll do is we'll take the first question and then the second question. The first question is just kind of a naturalistic question. Is it really the case that the sorts of findings that people have collected from laboratory studies actually represent the way the situations that occur in the home when parents are just using these words to children, right? So what is the referential context like for easy words in the home? And how do we actually convince ourselves that we can assess the clarity of referential intent from a speaker, from the parent when using a particular word in the home? Okay. One way of doing this, one way of trying to assess referential clarity, is to use a procedure that was developed a number of years ago by Lila Gleitman and Annie Lederer and Henry Gleitman and Jane Gillette, which they called this paradigm the human simulation paradigm, HSP. And it really was a way of assessing how obvious it was what the speaker meant in the moment in the home, what the parent was saying. Okay, and here's what they did. They wanted natural examples of parents saying particular common words to their kids. So let's say you record parent-child interactions in the home, parent and child just doing their daily activities, whatever they want to be doing. That could be snack time, playing on the floor, could be anything, okay? And you just simply record the video and the audio, and then you pick out the easy words. You pick out the words that are the ones that we know kids learn first, like the word cat, okay? So here's an example of the mother saying the word cat. She happens to say, "What a pretty cat," at this moment, okay? And this is the context that the child was given. Now, could we figure out a way of assessing how clear the message was if you didn't know English? So what if you didn't know the words what and pretty and cat? Would you be able to guess that what the parent was talking about at that moment was cats, or cats, with the meaning cat, okay? And so what they did was they turned the audio off from this little vignette of a parent saying the word cat. So now it's muted, so you can't hear the word cat and you can't hear the other words that the parent was saying. So that actually puts you in the situation that the child is in, who doesn't know any particular words of English at that point. And you give the person watching this video, an adult watching this video, the situational context that led up to the parent saying the word cat. So you give 30 seconds of the context leading up to the exact moment that the mother said the word cat. You get to watch what was going on, what was present, how they were interacting with each other. And then at the exact moment that the mother said the word cat, you instead hear the mystery word, let's say dax. You hear this word dax, or you hear a beep. It doesn't really matter. Some auditory cue to tell you that exact moment the mother said a particular word of English. And it's your job to guess what that word was. What did the mother say? Okay. So you as an adult, you're watching the parent and child interact with each other. You know a lot about human interaction. You know a lot about objects and what the meanings of words are in English and all of that. So you have rich knowledge that you could be using here. But you don't have access to the language at all. And your job is to simply guess what the mother was talking about at that exact moment. And the accuracy, the extent to which everyone can correctly guess cat, let's say, in this instance, is kind of like the wisdom of the crowd, right? You can get some, if you did this with 20 different people watching this video and 19 out of 20 people guess the word cat, then you can be pretty confident that this parent-child interaction is very transparent in its in the referential act. It's obvious what the mother was talking about. And the question is, for these easy words, is that what it's like? Is it the case that it's relatively easy to guess what the parent was talking about? Is there information in this input? And crucially, what we want to do here is not cherry pick items that we think are going to be helpful. Instead, what we want to do is just randomly sample examples of the mother saying cat, right? So we don't just use object play because there's lots of other times in which the mother might say a particular word. And we sample these concrete words uttered during everyday parent-child interactions, lots of different situations. After all, this is what the child is exposed to. The child really isn't taught the language, they're just exposed to the language and they learn it from that input, okay? Now, the first question you might be asking is, why are we using adults as our subjects here if we're asking about language acquisition? Well, it's actually very useful in this context because what we're really just interested in is the upper bound in terms of the informativity of particular context. So this gives us a good estimate of the referential uncertainty in the input for the child, right? So at least what we're getting here is that if you assume the child was really sophisticated and had mental capacities like an adult, what could you infer from that context? And we do know, for instance, that adults use joint attention when doing this task and it can use joint attention when learning language. So perhaps it should be relatively easy to guess cat when cat was said, and dog when dog was said, and shoe when shoe was said, for these easy words, right? Is that really the case? Well, I'm gonna, rather than answer that question, I'm gonna let you try some examples yourself here and see what it's like to actually try to learn from the input alone, observe the referential context. So we're going to take a look at some videos that we used in the study, just examples of the parents saying particular easy words. But we're going to do this using the Poll Everywhere app. So you should get out your phone right now. And we're going to start with something quite simple here. That's not the experiment, just to test out that this is actually working. So you can either just follow the instructions up here. You can go to the website, pollev.com, John Trueswell with 1L, 167, or just text John Trueswell with 1L, 167 to 2233. And once you join, you can then start. There we go. Somebody's able to do it. You can text your answer. Okay, good. And this just lets us know that it's working. And I'm going to wait a moment just to make sure that we can clearly see the answers. Everybody can see this, I hope. Okay. So United States and China and Germany, Puerto Rico, I see, etc. Okay. So you can see that this word cloud is building. And one of the things you should know about this word cloud is, like most word clouds, the bigger the word is, the higher the frequency that response, the more common that response is, okay? So now we're gonna use this human simulation paradigm task, and you're gonna respond by texting like this. So let's go on to the actual trial from an experiment like this. So what you're about to see is a video, which I hope works over Zoom. We'll see. I'm really pushing technology here. You're going to watch a video of just from parent interacting with their child. Grandma is present in the home in this video. That's fine. There's just people around in the child's life. And at the exact moment that you hear a beep, that's when the mother said the mystery word. And I want you to write down for the moment what you think that mystery word is when you hear that beep. And then we'll go to the next screen and you can text your answer, okay? So let's watch the video, and I hope it unfolds here. Is it moving? I hope everybody can see it. It should be moving. Okay. You get to see the whole interaction here. Beep. Okay, so now write down what you think the mystery word was. Okay, now, if everything works here, we can go to the next screen. So what did the mother say? Go ahead and text your answer. See the word cheese coming up. It's getting bigger. That means more people guess cheese. Somebody guessed food. Grape. So we can see that the dominant response is cheese. And if you gave the word cheese, you were right. That was what yay! That's what the mother had said at that moment from that beep. Notice that the other words are actually related to the word cheese. So you would be in the right semantic ballpark, if you will, from this example. And we can call this example a gem, a highly informative learning instance. So even though you couldn't tell what the mother was saying, you couldn't hear what the mother was saying, you could tell what the message was about, right? You could guess the word that was being uttered. And so this would be referred to as a gem, a high informative, transparent referential act. And we operationalized this in the study. We defined it just simply as any vignette in which the parent, the subjects in the experiment correctly guessed the mystery word with accuracy 50 to 100% of the time. So more than half of the subjects said the right word, okay? These are the gems. Now the question is, how common are the gems? Is this the tip? So if we randomly pick a whole bunch of examples of easy words, are the gems the usual situation? Nope, it turns out that's not the case. Only about 5% of the sample of easy words, in this case actually of easy and slightly hard words, nouns and verbs, were gems like this. So rarely were there interactions like this in which you could tell what the mother must have meant, okay? And even if you use just the concrete nouns, the really easy words, the ones we know that kids learn first, like cat and dog and shoe and cup, okay? If we just use, I don't know, anything like that, milk, for instance, anything. If we just use those concrete nouns, only 15% of those are gems as well. Most of the time, it's very hard to tell what the parent is saying. So let's take a look at another example. We're going to do one more example here. Here is a different family, and you are supposed to watch this video and again, write down what you think the mystery word is. It's a different word this time. Write it down and then we'll have you text your answer. So let's watch this one. There's mom. Mom went to Notre Dame apparently. And sibling around this time. Beep. Go ahead and guess. Write down your answer. What did the mother say? Okay, so now let's text your answers for this one. Someone said toy, ball, cup, tidy. Ball is becoming more common. Cup. Seems like ball and cup are competing here for the best answer. Okay, and toy now. Toy is gaining in response. Okay, all right. Well, in this case, the correct answer actually was, I believe, I can't see it on my screen, but I think it was the word cup. Okay, I was surprised that a few of you actually guessed the word cup. Because from this video, rarely anybody guesses the correct answer. This is what you would call a low informative junk item. And we can define those as any instance, any vignette like this in which only 20% or fewer of the adult subjects were able to guess what the mother had said. Over 60% of concrete nouns, the easy words, are junk like this. In other words, the easy words aren't so easy. The majority of times when the mother is saying a common concrete noun, it's not clear what the mother is talking about, okay? So the vast majority of content words uttered by parents are these junk items in this regard, okay? At least in terms of trying to glean something from the situational context to infer the meaning, okay? So this first finding suggests it's both a negative finding and a positive finding in a way. The positive way of describing this is that there are rare moments of referential clarity for easy words, okay? Unfortunately, the majority of times when a child is hearing a common word that they eventually will learn the meaning of, the situational context is not terribly informative. Most of the time, people can't guess what the word meant. And we operationalize it as less than 20% accuracy. But in fact, most of the time, subjects just guess, the subject's guesses are essentially 0% correct under these circumstances. And they're wide ranging in their guesses. So this is also important. It's not like everybody guesses the same wrong answer. It's not like the context is misleading in some way. The word was cup and everybody guessed shoe. No, people guess all kinds of different word meanings from these items. So that's pretty bad, because what that means is that there's not anything helpful from that context. Only 15% of the easy words were gems, where it was easy to guess what the word meant. So in other words, if you could tell the gems from the junk, then you would be able to learn something about the meanings of these words quite nicely, right? But this is still a problem, because how are you supposed to know what's a gem and what's junk, right? How is it that you would be able to tell something was uninformative versus informative, okay? A second finding from this work, which I think is really important to demonstrate and actually validates this method in many ways, is that it turns out that the more gems that a child hears in the home actually leads to better vocabulary growth for that child. So we actually were able to connect the accuracy of the guesses of adults watching the videos to the vocabulary growth of the children in those videos. So what we did in this study was, it was a much larger scale study. We had 56 different families from a large corpus from Chicago, where this is a video corpus where Susan Golden Meadow and colleagues went into the home every 4 months and videotaped parents interacting with their children and transcribed everything. And what we did in collaboration with them was we just played this human simulation paradigm game again with all of these different families. We showed vignettes, examples of parents saying common, easy words to their children from the 56 different families. And we asked, let me back up for a moment, we just simply asked, are some families easier to guess what the words meant as opposed to other families? And if so, does that actually predict how well that child then later goes on to learn the language? So we took vignettes from the children when they were 14 months of age and 18 months of age. And what we found was that for those kids where the parents offer more gems, they actually go on, these kids in these videos go on to have larger vocabularies at school entry 3 years later, So what was done was that they tracked, Susan Golden Meadow had tracked how many words these children knew and assessed their vocabulary when they went into school, these 56 different kids. And here's the relationship here between human simulation paradigm guesses, the adult's guesses, and the child's Peabody vocabulary score at 54 months. So along the x-axis here is the human simulation paradigm accuracy. So how well parents, adults observing these videos could guess what the parents were saying, okay? And each dot represents, okay, a different family, right? So each of these different dots represents a family. And as you go further to the right in this graph, what that means is that that's a family where it was relatively easy to guess what the parent was saying. So there were some families where you could guess about 40% of the time what the parent had said. But there were other families where on the left where you could only guess about 5 or 10% of the time. And although this is not a super strong relationship, it is a reliable relationship. What you find is that for the families in which it's easier to guess what the parents were saying in their parent-child interactions at 14 months of age, those kids have higher vocabulary scores 3 years later at school entry. And in fact, the growth of vocabulary from 14 months to 54 months is also predicted by the transparency of the referential acts. So parents who offer clear, transparent referential acts have children who learn more language, right? And this holds even when you take into account how much language there is in the home, because we also know that just the sheer amount of language that's in the home predicts vocabulary size, as it should, right? So parents who talk to their kids a lot have kids who have larger vocabularies when they go into school. So it's good to talk to your kids a lot. After all, kids with higher vocabulary scores at school entry are actually kids who are more likely to graduate high school. Lots of different academic achievement records correlate with vocabulary size at school entry. So it is very good to talk to your kids a lot. But even if you factor out that variable of the amount of talk in the home, this relationship still holds. It means that if you are clear and talking about things that are co-present in the environment, and you try to provide clear referential cues to what you're talking about, that's going to make it easier for the child to learn. That's going to make it more likely that there's going to be a gem in the environment where it's obvious what you must have meant, and so learning should occur. Also, interestingly, although the amount of talk in the home is related to socioeconomic status, how wealthy your family is, that's something that's been shown over and over again, and we found it in our data set too. The quality of the input, this assessment of referential clarity, is not related to SES, which is really kind of nice and good news in some ways. What that means is that whether you are a poor family with low income or a wealthy family with lots of income, your skill at talking to your child and being clear about what you're referring to is unrelated to that, right? You may be very clear or you may not be for whatever reason, but that doesn't seem to be correlated with the amount of education you had or the amount of money you have. So that's interesting, because what that would mean is that if you just talk to your child more, then odds are that you're going to provide gems from time to time, right? Even if you're not so great at it, right? But at least sometimes you'll provide gems, and you can up the frequency of those gems, right? Okay, so now finally, one more thing that we can ask is, what actually makes a gem a gem? What is it in the input that actually tells you what the parent was talking about, okay? This was a separate study that we did on the same data set of the 56 different families, right? So if you think about it for a moment, what we have here are videos of parents interacting with their children and an estimate of how clear it is that you can tell what the parent meant, right? The referential clarity. And so if we were to go and annotate these videos, these vignettes, for what was happening in the videos, could we actually find certain behaviors in these videos that would predict the transparency of that vignette? What's going on in the videos that make gems gems and junk junk, right? So what we did was we coded for all the kinds of things that people had hypothesized were relevant for identifying the meaning of easy words. Like, is the referent present, right? Is there a dog around when the word dog is being said? Is the parent attending to that referent? And if so, at what time, right? Is the child attending to that referent? Is the parent gesturing at the referent? And critically, for all of these measures, at what time are these things happening, right? Are they happening at the exact moment that the mother says the word, or is it just the overall gist of the situation that tells you that something is a gem or not? It turns out that time matters tremendously. So gems, but not junk, the ones where it's easy to guess what the parents are saying, contain cues that align with the speech act itself. So here's one example of this. So what's being graphed here is the likelihood that the parent is looking at the referent, at the dog, or at the cup, or whatever, over time. And that vertical line there, that vertical blue line, indicates the exact moment that the mother said the mystery word, like cup or dog, right? And I have 3 different lines here of the likelihood that the parent was looking at that object. This first line here, the dark one, the one that peaks at about 60%, at the exact moment when the mother said the word, those are the gems. Those are the ones where people are guessing cheese, right? The cheese video is actually a good example of that. The mother brings out the object and looks at it right when she says cheese. The parent is attending to it. But it isn't that the parent is attending to the object throughout. The parent is attending to the object at the exact moment they're saying the word. You can see that shoot up and peak at that moment. The bottom line is the junk. So these are the ones where you couldn't guess what the parent was saying, okay? And and the ones in between were these rare intermediate ones as well, right? So where some people could guess what the word was that was said by the parent. So if you look at all of these different cues to attention, like whether the object is present or not, whether the child is looking at the object or not, all of them have this tight temporal characteristic. And actually all of them independently contribute to the likelihood that something is a gem, okay? So it's very nice, because what that means is that in the natural context, when the stars align, if you will, when the different cues align, then boom, you can lock on to a meaning, okay? And timing really does matter. We actually demonstrated this, that it has a causal role in your ability to guess what the mother was talking about by doing this sort of mean version of the human simulation paradigm. What we did was we took all the gems, the ones that were like the cheese item that you saw. We take all the videos that it's obvious what the parent is talking about. We take those, we play them to subjects, and we either play the beep at the exact moment the mother actually said the mystery word, or we're mean and we move it a little bit. We move it 1 second later, or 2 seconds later, or 3 seconds later, or 1 second too soon, or 2 seconds too soon. So in other words, we're misleading the subjects as to exactly when the word was said. Now, if gems are just gems and the gist of the scene tells you that this was a cheese video, that obvious this was about cheese, then moving that beep shouldn't matter at all. But indeed, it does matter. Just moving the beep 2 seconds too late, or 2 seconds too soon, or 4 seconds too late, or 4 seconds too soon, drastically reduces your ability to guess what the parent was talking about. So you can see at 0 seconds, that's the items where the beep is faithfully lined up with the mystery word. You actually are hearing the beep at the moment the mother said cheese. That's when, of course, everybody can guess it, because these are the gems. We picked the gems, 60% correct. But we can see reliable decreases in accuracy if we just move the beep one way or the other. Okay, so I know I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to briefly summarize what I've shown you here about the referential context in the home. And I can tell you about the learning machinery some other time, or answer questions later about that. So to summarize what I've shown you here is that in one sense, Dare Baldwin was right, that, that the acts of joint attention are highly informative and help the child learn the language. But in another sense that she missed in a way, that missed from doing a laboratory study, is the observation that those instances are incredibly rare. So even for the easy words like cookie and shoe, only about 15% of those examples are informative. The rest of the items, it's very hard to tell what the parent was talking about, and hence you wouldn't be able to infer the meaning of the word from those examples. The junk items have many possible reference present, and people guess all kinds of things as to the meaning of the word, and there are very few cues telling you what the word meant. The gems have a clear referent often present at the exact moment when the word was being said, and precisely timed cues of attention are present as well. And critically, I also showed you that for families that have more of these gems, then kids learn more, right? So for those families that on average include more gems in their learning context, they are going to have kids who have larger vocabularies and learn more about the language more quickly. Okay, so that summarizes essentially the first part of the talk, and it's going to be the only part of the talk today because I'm running out of time and I don't want to go over, and I would like to answer some questions. But I'll leave the following.
Sorry, John. Hang on one sec. I believe I muted you. I'm sorry, just a minute, just like 30 seconds ago. Can you unmute yourself? Let's see if I can do it from here.
How dare you?
Oh, I did it. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I wanted to unmute our audience so that they could.
Okay. So, but just to summarize what I was.
Oh my God. Wait. I think I'm messing everything up. Hang on. Can you say something?
Yes, now I can see I'm unmuted.
Okay. I promise not to touch any more buttons.
Okay, I'll just very briefly say here, given this kind of input, what kind of learner works on this input? Is it one that only focuses on the gems and learns from those instances? Or is it one that just takes into account all of the different examples and tries to learn from every single one and aggregates information together in some way? Are you able to learn something from the junk as well? And I'll just leave it at that, and I'll take questions.
Okay, my apologies again for pressing buttons on the backside. Jessica sent me a message that said, don't touch anything. So I think that if we have done this correctly, everyone is unmuted, so anyone from our audience can ask a question. So we invite those at this time. I feel like I see Colin is still there. I'd like to call on Colin because he's good about asking questions. If he has one, he may not have one ready. That might not be fair. Jenna is here. Oh, Colin says he can't unmute. Oh, wait, I can see. I can do it from here. Colin, you're unmuted.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. I just had one quick question. You showed, I think, very nicely that you can make a gem into junk by shifting the timing just slightly. Could you go the other way? Could you, in some cases, save or rescue some of the junk and show that you can actually make it a gem just by playing with the timing again?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Can we make the junk into gems? Is it the case that the junk items are just mistimed cues, right, in some ways, right? We haven't done that, and in part because it's a little bit hard to know which of the different, well, actually, you probably could do it. I think that what you could do to actually answer that question is take all the junk items, and now you just align them in some way to make it so that the beep is occurring when the parent was what happened to be looking at the right object at that moment. And I would suspect that you could get people to guess the right answer. But I think there's a sort of a different answer that would lead you to a different conclusion about language learning. And that is, can you turn junk into gems, not by messing with the timing, but by providing you as an observer of this video with some additional information that a more sophisticated language learner might have access to, right? And this is a game that was actually played with this paradigm, to turn junk into gems in that way. So for instance, imagine you already knew some words. You already knew cookie and shoe and mommy and a few other easy words, right? And now you hear the word think, okay? Would it be easier to guess the meaning of the word think from the situational context, from watching that vignette, right? Mother says think, there's not really thinking going on. But if I gave you the other words that the mother had said in that sentence, right? If I gave you as an adult watching this video, that linguistic information that an older child already knows, would that help you, right? And it turns out it helps you a little bit. It gives you a little bit of a boost. It helps you guess the verbs a little bit better if you know the nouns. And in certain cases, it becomes kind of obvious that that would be the case. So if you, for instance, like the word eat, right? If you know some food terms already, and so you hear, let's turn the word eat into the word Dax, and you hear things like mommy Dax cookie, right? And mommy Dax spaghetti or whatever, then you might be able to guess what Dax means from that. But notice you're also getting another piece of information that might turn the junk into gems as well. So from a situation where you wouldn't be able to guess what eat means just by looking out there in the world, you're also getting the syntax of the sentence. You're getting something about the word order, who's doing what to whom. So a language learner who has access to that stuff too can turn the 60% here, see all these really bad items, these junk items, can turn lots and lots of those into gems. And indeed, that's the theory that is currently probably the most influential theory in vocabulary growth and language acquisition. And it's referred to as the syntactic bootstrapping theory, which is that you're using the syntax of your language when you have access to it. Once you've learned a little bit of the syntax of the language, that you know that nouns before verbs are subjects and likely to be the actor or agent of the event, and the nouns after are more likely to be objects, et cetera, things like that. You've learned sort of pseudo syntax, a little bit of syntax. That can give you a learner a leg up on these hard words. These words, I keep hearing think, I keep hearing eat, I keep hearing jump. I don't know what they mean, but I'm hearing them in particular sentential contexts. I'm hearing them in particular linguistic environments. And if I can combine that with what I'm seeing, then I can learn the meaning of that word too.
It also kind of gives you a progression or succession of like the simplest, easiest words to, as you get more context clues, you can kind of accrete more and more.
Exactly, right. That's exactly right. So it explains also why it is those other words get learned later, right? So if you only have access to what you see out there in the world, then there's no way you can really learn think or a lot of verbs, actually. But if you've already learned a little bit about the language and you're hearing that, the context, the linguistic context, and you're seeing what's out there in the world, then yes, you're going to be good. You're going to learn more. In fact, I think I might even have a graph of that a little bit later here. I can show you very briefly, maybe. I don't want to break out of the presentation mode. I'm going to go to, because I know that'll screw things up. I'm just skip. These are not all the slides I was going to show you. This is extra slides. Don't worry. I think I have it here. Where is it? Yeah, here it comes. So we can give you just the scene. We can give you the scene plus the nouns that occurred with the verb, like cookie, mommy, and you. We can give you just the syntax, like did, lorby, lorp, lo, a mipin, give you the syntax and not the content words. For did mommy give you a cookie? You can turn it into a bunch of nonsense words and give you just the syntax. Or we can give you everything, the nouns and the the syntax and the other words. Did mommy blank you a cookie? And you can see how well people guess with this environment. And here's, I'm gonna skip over a bunch of slides here from that. Here's the basic finding from this, right there. It's an ugly colored graph. I didn't color this, but as you can see, as you give people more information, things that were originally junk, things that were, here's this video itself, the scene on its own, only 20% of the time are people guessing the right verb. These are verbs that were tested here. So you watch the video, try to guess the word think or know or want or jump even, and you're really bad. But if you add in additional information, now these ones that were junk become gems. People are guessing quite well. And if you knew that stuff about the language, those items become gems.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, I think we are out of time. If anybody would like to ask a question, you're welcome to, but we are also out of time. So if you need to go to something else, we understand that too. John, thank you as always.
Okay. Yeah.
For this.
Yeah, I have no idea whether it was clear or helpful and a good talk or a bad talk in this environment. I have no practice doing this kind of thing.
I know, and I'm sorry that I muted you.
That's okay. Right when I was summarizing.
I know.
Yeah.
I was trying to, yeah, I did the same thing twice, which is the worst, so I didn't even look.
It was fine. Okay.
But it's fascinating work. It's also always really interesting to hear that that all this talking to our kids actually does do something.
Yes. Yeah.
What I guess I'm a little bit curious, are there any intervention or any programs that are specifically designed for that you think do a really good job? I've heard of a couple in different parts of the country, but
yeah, there are some people trying to do interventions of various sorts, and certainly some of them are probably more helpful than others. I think that so I'm always a little bit concerned about interventions because take the following situation. You tell people, just talk to your kids more, and that will increase their vocabulary. And you sign some people up from various parts of the country with different levels of income. And indeed, if you teach them to talk more, their vocabulary goes up, right? The question though is, can you actually use that intervention generally to everybody in the population? Is it easy to implement this particular intervention? Oftentimes it's not. It's a very intensive process of trying to get parents to talk to their kids more. The other thing though is that you never quite know what the most effective thing is for doing the same thing. So for instance, maybe the underlying cause for this relationship between the amount of talk and income is that parents with lower income are just exhausted. They're working 2 or 3 jobs. They're not home that much, and so they're not having opportunities to interact with their kids as much. And when they are, they're just totally wiped out. So if you give that kind of intervention of telling people to talk more to their kids, that's maybe not so helpful. In fact, the other intervention that has been done, which famously now, is to just give parents money. And that's very effective at improving all kinds of things in the home, right? So if you just improve their economic standing, you find that talk goes up, you find that all kinds of good things start happening in terms of the education of the child. So there's a question sometimes about like the relative cost of the intervention, how expensive it is to intervene versus just taking that money and giving it to a particular family, right? So it's certainly the case that you can affect the amount of talk in the home and even affect how you talk to your children. But those methods haven't really taken our findings into account too much yet. So it would be very nice to actually say, okay, what you need to do is spend more time talking about the here and now, things that are happening in front of you, and that you interact with your child, that you pay attention to what they're attending to and talk about that, things like that, giving them clues as to what could turn information, examples of junk into gems, right? So it would be nice to see people implement that specifically, but I'm always a little bit skeptical because of the fact that probably there are other ways that are more effective at helping families.
Yeah, it's interesting. This time right now too, people are maybe interacting more.
Yeah, right.
More, so there could be some interesting data that comes out of this. But also, how many of those things are going to be gems? Because I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Okay, great.
We will end our recording, and always a pleasure.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to just email me a question or anything, I would be happy to answer offline. Okay, great. Thank you. Bye, everybody.